Open the podcast bay doors, Hal.
Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 121 of Welcome to Geektown. I'm your host, Kurt Onstead. I've been a proud geek all my life, being into role-playing games, board games, sci-fi, fantasy, and especially superheroes and comics. And I want to help others join me in those pursuits, but I've found that sometimes people can get overwhelmed or feel left out because they don't already have what some consider the requisite knowledge to be considered a fan. And that's where Welcome to Geektown comes in. Here you can ask your questions without feeling like a gatekeeper is calling you out for not yet being fully versed in every aspect of your new interest. We have a fun question from Scott Parker this week, who is curious about the connection between colors and superheroes, specifically those in the DC universe. He wrote, quote, "I've heard colors mean a lot in DC Comics. Poison Ivy and Swamp Thing are green because they protect green, and red means animals. Beast Boy even turned red due to this, with much upset from fans. Is this something?" It definitely is something, Scott. There's actually two different ways that colors are extra meaningful in the DC universe. This week I'll cover the connection that you alluded to, and next episode I'll talk about the other one. The green was originally introduced as a concept in Swamp Thing number 47, part of writer Alan Moore's groundbreaking run, and penciled by Stan Watch, with inks from Ron Randall, in a story titled The Parliament of Trees. During this time, Swamp Thing's title was part of the regular DC universe, although the ties were kept fairly distant to the point where eventually, this title and others, like Sandman, were brought under their own publishing line, Vertigo, and were considered separate from DC continuity for a time. They were officially brought back together as one during the New 52 era, a status quo that continues to this day as of this recording. Getting back to this particular issue, Swamp Thing, with the help of magician John Constantine, visits the titular Parliament of Trees, which consists of plant elementals, most of which are former avatars of the Green, a role currently occupied by Swamp Thing. This parliament exists in a separate dimension called the Green, and it is this other plane of existence that allows all plants to connect with one another and is the source of Swamp Thing's powers. While there can only be one avatar at any given time on Earth, other characters have had access to the Green and its powers over plant life, including Black Orchid, Poison Ivy, and Solomon Grundy, although he was apparently tainted by the Grey, which we'll get to in a little bit. I mentioned the New 52 earlier, and in that reboot of the DC universe, the Golden Age superheroes were no longer part of DC's main continuity. Instead, they were placed on Earth 2. I'll refer to this as post-New 52 Earth 2 from now on. And if any of this is confusing, go back to episode 1 where I talk about all the different reboots of the DC universe. This started a whole new story from the ground up, referencing the concepts we're discussing in this episode quite a bit, and using some of the characters from the original Age of Heroes. One such character was Alan Scott, aka the Golden Age Green Lantern. In this alternate universe, he was still Green Lantern, but received his powers from being the Avatar of the Green, rather than them being related to the other green source of power in the DC universe that we'll talk about next episode. Although getting his powers from plants would have explained his original weakness to wood in the Golden Age. One of the forces that sometimes opposes the green in the DC/Vertigo universe is the gray, which represents fungal life, like mushrooms. Unlike every other force we'll talk about in this episode, the gray is the only one not ruled by a parliament. In Swamp Thing Annual number 4 from 1988, writer Steve Bissette, penciler Pat Broderick, and inkers Ron Randall and Eduardo Barreto were the first to show us the gray, which actually originated on another planet in our solar system that was destroyed eons ago, the remnants of which seeded Earth with fungal life. The collective consciousness that ruled the gray coexisted with the green for some time before they found a host that was obsessed with gaining power and thus wanted the gray to take over and consume the green entirely. The current avatar, Mickey, is thankfully much more peaceful and is happy to let the green and the gray leave each other be for the most part. With plants and fungi each having their own color, it makes sense that the animal kingdom would too. About 2 years after Alan Moore and Company introduced us to the green, his British compatriot Grant Morrison, along with penciler Chaz Truog and inker Doug Hazelwood, gave us the red, although it didn't have that name at first. Originally referred to as the template, and then later the morphogenetic field, the concept was introduced in Animal Man number 1, released in September of 1988. This field is how Buddy Baker, aka Animal Man, and other animal-powered heroes and villains are able to access the abilities of different creatures. It was another British writer, Jamie Delano, who named this field the Red, and tied it into the mythology of the green and the gray around issue number 50 of Animal Man in the early 90s. In Delano's first arc, drawn by Steve Pugh, Buddy is run over and killed, but his consciousness is able to fully access the Red, ruled by the Parliament of Limbs, and uses this power in order to reconstruct a body for himself. His first attempt is comprised of many different animal parts, but he's later able to use a piece of his original corpse as a template for building a human body to inhabit again. In addition to Buddy Baker and his daughter Maxine, who is the actual avatar of the Red, with Buddy acting as a protector until she's old enough, many other characters with animalistic powers are said to access the Red in one way or another, including, but not limited to, Beast, Vixen, Black Orchid, and even anyone who consumes the Man-Bat serum. As Scott mentioned in his question, Beast Boy from the Doom Patrol and the Titans is also connected to the Red, and during the 2012 New 52 reboot, he was changed from having green skin, as he had originally been portrayed, to having red skin in order to reflect this connection. However, likely due to fan reception, when he reappeared in Teen Titans number 1 in 2014, he was back to being his regular green self with no explanation for why the shift had occurred. On the post-New 52 Earth 2, the avatar of the Red was Yolanda Montez. If you watch the Stargirl TV show, or follow the regular DC Comics continuity, you may recognize her as the legacy hero who took on the Wildcat mantle after Ted Grant. The next colorful dimension to be introduced usually goes by the absence of color, as it's usually called the clear, although sometimes it is referred to as the blue, and is ruled over by the Parliament of Waves. Given that information, you may be able to guess that this dimension is connected to water and aquatic life. We haven't seen many characters who have been shown to be able to access the clear, but one famous example is Aquaman, during Peter David and Jim Califiore's run in a story that guest starred both Swamp Thing and Animal Man in one of their rare post-Vertigo, pre-New 52 appearances in mainstream DC Comics. Although it hasn't been referenced as such in later works, Aquaman's ability to communicate and even persuade aquatic creatures to do his bidding is called out as an ability that comes from the Clear during that story. The other character we've seen so far that is definitively a part of the Clear is Mai Miyazaki, aka Naiad, a water elemental originally seen in Firestorm number 90 through 93, and then seen again later in Spectre number 19, 21, and 22. Both of these story arcs were written and drawn by John Ostrander and Tom Mandrake, respectively, although both of these stories were written before the Clear and the Parliament of Waves were introduced in Swamp Thing number 158. Naiad's connection to this force was retconned in the Aquaman story noted earlier, where she made her last major appearance. While there is no stated avatar of the Blue/Clear so far in the regular DC continuity, the post-New 52 Earth 2 did have one, a creature named Azathoth, based loosely on the old one bearing the same name from the Cthulhu mythos. The final major force I want to bring up is the Black, most often referred to as the Rot. This dimension of decay and death was first shown in Animal Man Volume 2, Number 1, part of the New 52 relaunch. This issue was written by Jeff Lemire and drawn by Travel Foreman, with some inks provided by Dan Green. The Rot is controlled by the Parliament of Decay, and while it states that it needs life to sustain itself, it also fights against the red and the green as much as it can, using its Avatar of Death to oppose the living avatars. The Arcane family, recurring characters in the Swamp Thing books, have had two Avatars of Death in its line, Anton and Abigail, although Abigail took the mantle reluctantly after her uncle Anton died. In addition to the green, gray, red, black, and Blue/Clear dimensions, other dimensions are known to exist that have similar elemental properties, although the other ones we have been shown so far do not have a color associated with them, and have only made a few appearances here and there, and so not much is known about them. The three other realms named so far are the Melt, connected to the Earth and run by the Parliament of Stones, the Divided, associated with bacteria and other microscopic life, and the Metal, a technological realm run by the Rhythm. There is also a realm of fire that has not been given an official name, although it is known to be run by the Parliament of Flames. As I've noted, most of the stories involving these otherworldly forces have been part of the Vertigo universe, and/or the characters associated with that imprint after they were folded back into mainstream DC continuity. However, even in the regular DC books, the imagery and descriptions depicting these worlds are often disturbing and not recommended for younger readers. With the exception of the Aquaman story I brought up in connection with the Clear, basically every book involving these extra-dimensional powers have been rated either T+, for 15 years of age or older, or for mature readers only, 18 and above. So take that into account before you go hunting these stories down. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there's a whole other set of forces connected to different colors in the DC universe. One for each color of the rainbow, plus some. And I'll give you the rundown on those in just 2 weeks. In the meantime, please remember that I'm always looking for other questions that you want answered for future episodes. Please send any and all of those via email to welcome2geektown, all spelled out, @gmail.com. Or you can go to the website, welcome2, the number 2 in this case, geektown.com, and click the Submit a Question link if you'd prefer to remain anonymous. Other contact options include facebook.com/welcome-to-geektown or Twitter @geektownpodcast. Also, if you'd like to support the show directly, come join the Patreon at patreon.com/welcome-to-geektown for just $1 per month to get access to full scripts of the shows, audio outtakes, and a monthly shoutout. You can also help the show grow by subscribing and giving a 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts to join the Geektown City Council, which helps other people find the show so we can all tell them, welcome to Geektown, population, us. Welcome to Geektown is written, narrated, edited, and produced by me, Kurt Onstead. Theme music is by Aaron Levitz, logo art by Archie Santana. All other sound clips of the copyrighted material, their respective owners, and no infringement is intended, falling under fair use.